So if you want to see this done really well, head over to John at the Digital Gramophone. I'm sure folks who subscribe to or watch my page or channel probably watch his as well. Similar taste in music, although we live on opposite sides of the country. He recently did his top 15 greatest American bands. I think he did it yesterday, the day before. I watched it. It was tremendous. He's always good with the artwork and the intros and just really good explanations. And I really enjoyed his video. So I will link that at the bottom. He had mentioned that Mazzy, he and myself had talked about doing a video like this, which we have. I think we've talked about it a bunch of times. Greatest American bands. So maybe, I guess we're all just gonna do it separately, and then maybe we'll all do one together and debate. Who knows? But similar caveats to John, in that, you know, the biggest sort of American acts, you know, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Petty, or, you know, all the great soul singers, Sam Cooke, Aretha, Chuck Berry, Elvis, I consider them all to be more, either they are just straight up solo acts, or, you know, they have band names: Bruce and the E Street Band, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Neil Young, Crazy Horse. You have some Dylan in the Band stuff. But I just don't, I consider them solo artists. So I may do top 15 American solo artists, even though they have bands. So I hope that makes sense. And this, I'm gonna try to tell just a sort of personal anecdote on each of the top 15. This is my 15. It's not my 15 favorite, but it's who I legitimately think are the greatest. And there were a ton of bands that were so hard to leave off, and some that you'll be like, what? But I guess it's sort of a blend of who I think is the greatest and who are my favorites. So let's get started. We will start at 15. 15 is a more recent act. LCD Soundsystem. Let's move this over just a bit. There we go. Great news out of their camp. They're apparently working on a new record. A tremendous live band. This is Sound of Silver, which came out, was it 07? Yeah. I think this is their best record. All their records are great. One of the greatest shows I ever saw, I think it was 2011, which was supposed to be their last show ever at Terminal 5 in New York. That obviously, that ended just a few days later when they announced the MSG shows, and they split for a couple of years, came back, and they're obviously now a full-on touring band. I've seen them a bunch. Just, of the last 15 years, probably my favorite band. I don't know of any band that like does dance and rock as well as they do it. They're just so fun. And the documentary on them is fantastic. DFA is such a cool label. I think they're one of the greatest of all time, clearly. So that's 15. Number 14. If you told me I would have said this a couple of years ago, I would have never believed it. And I think revisiting this act, as I've shared many times, is tied to the loss of my brother, which was in early 2021. There is, yeah, whenever I say that, I still kind of just either get taken back to good memories, or Lane and I, just as kids, we listened to the Eagles a lot, and he always stood by them. He didn't care if they were cool or not. I will admit, when I was living in Brooklyn and thought I was a cool hipster, well, I don't like the word hipster, but like, I thought I was, you know, 20s, early 30s in Brooklyn, a little bit of maybe snooty attitude. No, I hope not. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I was definitely snooty with music. I don't think I was snooty as a person. I hope not. Comment if you think I was. But I came back to the Eagles in the last few years. There's some songs I can't really listen to. The song New Kid in Town, uh, it's just too personal. When I went back to New Jersey, I think it was a few months after Lane passed away, I was staying at my mother's, and I would always get up and go get coffee and breakfast in the morning at Dunkin' Donuts. And I remember I got coffee and donut or whatever, bagel or something. I was sitting in the car, and I turned on the radio, and New Kid in Town started, and I just wept, lost it. And that was, I think it was the first time I had heard that since Lane passed away, and there's just something about that song. I remember us listening to it as kids on those, like, remember like the stackable, like, Fisher stereos? I think I had a Fisher. I don't remember what Lane had, maybe a Sony or Pioneer. And there's just something about that song. But the Eagles, you know, they're very divisive, but they have put out incredible music. I love the Eagles now. I listen to them all the time, and that's probably just being at the age that I'm at. You sort of return to a lot of the artists that you listen to as a kid, teenager, and I've definitely done that. This one is probably going to come as a surprise to people, but I don't really care because I think it's true. At 13, I have Uncle Tupelo. They never get the due that they deserve. How many bands ever were this influential in terms of creating so many new great bands? And some will say those bands didn't come from Uncle Tupelo. I don't know if I believe that. You know, Uncle Tupelo is obviously Jeff Tweedy of Wilco, Jay Farrar of Sunvolt, and the first few records was Mike Hydorn on drums. But the most important band in my lifetime, outside of Springsteen, which I guess for purposes of this video, I'm not calling a band, Uncle Tupelo changed my life, changed my brother's life, changed my younger brother's life. So many of my friends were met because I discovered this band, current friends, college friends, and they put out 4 records. I would say at least 2 are perfect. The other 2 are pretty close. I would say Still Feel Gone and Anodyne are perfect. No Depression and March 16th, pretty close. Just, you know, 2 of the greatest. I would call Jay Farrar one of the greatest vocalists of our times, certainly from a country rock standpoint. Jeff Tweedy, one of the greatest artists of our time. You know, they were together, I think it was 87 to 94 as Uncle Tupelo. The records came out 90 to 93. And, I mean, just so many bands. The whole Americana scene, I point it back to them. I know they would say, well, there was Graham Parsons, they meaning Uncle Tupelo. I remember reading interviews with them where they did not want to own that, or at least in some interviews didn't. They would talk about Jason and the Scorchers, the early Jayhawks, the Byrds, as I mentioned, Graham Parsons. But that whole mid-90s, late 90s, early 2000s scene, Blue Mountain, the old 97s, Six String Drag, Hazeldine, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, Freakwater, just some of the greatest music ever made, and I think a lot of it you can point to Uncle Tupelo. I almost think this should be higher than 13, maybe 1, or 1 for me. So at 13 is the great Belleville, Illinois band, Uncle Tupelo. Number 12, Pavement. I mean, if Uncle Tupelo started alt-country Americana, or like modern-ish day alt-country Americana, Pavement started indie rock. I mean, there's a lot of other acts, again, you could point to in that scene. But when I think of indie rock, which I think is one of the greatest periods of music ever, you know, the 90s into the 2000s, and it's still sort of around today with folks like MJ Lenderman and LCD Soundsystem still making records, Strokes are still making records, Pavement is touring again. These guys in the 90s, they were it. And it's funny, a lot of these bands, or Pavement, when I talk about indie rock, I was not really into Pavement in college. I was in college from 92 to 96. So right in the heart of Pavement. But I was into Beck, wasn't really into Nirvana. My friends were into Pearl Jam. I never really was. I was more Neil Young, Springsteen, and then I got into Uncle Tupelo. But Pavement I sort of discovered when I lived in Brooklyn, 1998 to 2005. My friend Fred, who I've probably talked about a bunch here, he had the greatest taste when we were in college. He turned me on to Pavement and Guided by Voices. That's a band I forgot in this top 15. Sorry, should have been in there. So yes, this list isn't perfect. I didn't spend a lot of time putting it together. But Steve Malkmus, Spiral Stairs, all the guys from Pavement, just tremendous band. At number 11, a lot of people would put them in the top 5, Nirvana. This is my favorite Nirvana record. I know it's unplugged, or, it's not a proper studio album, but was I at MTV? No. I worked at MTV from 98 to 01. This was in 1991, so no, it wasn't even close. I think this is one of the greatest live albums ever. The video, I watched it on YouTube all the time. I remember my buddy Brian and I were driving to Tower Records when we heard on the radio, because yes, we listened to the radio back then. I think we listened to like the local, we were in Boston, so I think we listened to like a local college radio station, maybe like Harvard University, Harvard, whatever. I don't think we were listening to our own college radio station, maybe BU, Tufts, I don't know. But I know we were listening to the radio and it came on that Kurt Cobain died. And I remember, I think we went back, we were living on South Street in Brighton. Is that right? Or Brookline? I always mix up those towns. And I remember we came back and we like told all of our roommates, who I think were just like getting up. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but I think we were out the night before. And we like went and got beers and sat on our patio and listened to Nirvana. And again, we were into Nirvana, but not huge. I definitely got into Nirvana much later. But, hugely important band who I think gets better and better as the years pass. Number 10, I'm going with the Beach Boys. This is Pet Sounds, without question, one of, if not the greatest album of all time. A sound that was just wow. A massive, massive sound. This is an old copy that I think I got from a friend of mine in New Jersey's father, like right after college. I think he was getting rid of his record collection and I took it, and this was in there. So to my friend Matt, if you're watching this, I believe it was your dad who gave me this copy. A lot of people would say they should be way higher. They should be number 1. I have sort of mixed feelings about the Beach Boys. Sometimes I think they're overrated. They're clearly not overrated. They made incredible, wouldn't it be nice, Sloop John B, God Only Knows. These are some of the greatest songs ever composed. But to me, in terms of the larger spread of their catalog, it's not up there with the top few. But I felt like they had to be in there, and they do deserve to be in there, and Brian Wilson's obviously a genius. So they land at number 10 on my list. Number 9 is the Minneapolis band The Replacements. I got to see The Replacements for the first time in 2013. I flew out to Denver to see Riot Fest. It was Replacements, Iggy Pop, a bunch of other, I think Yo La Tengo was there, yeah. And then I saw them again when they played, I think it was just a couple of years later, in San Francisco. And both shows were just absolutely tremendous. But this is probably my favorite album cover of all time. I think this was taken by Daniel Corrigan. Just an incredible cover by Daniel Corrigan, yeah. He also took, where is it? I think it's there, that Uncle Tupelo photo. Is that the Uncle Tupelo photo? Yeah, I bought an original of that and gave one to my younger brother for his wedding, and of course kept one for myself. Mid-80s, hugely influential in like the indie garage rock scene, punk, just what a band. I mean, I saw Tommy Stinson, who's right here. I think he was like 12 years old when they or 15 or something. Maybe he was a little bit older because this is a few records in. I saw him perform just down the block from me on my birthday last year, on my 50th birthday. I could get into a story there. I'm not a birthday person, but on my 50th birthday last year, I got stood up by a friend, an ex-girlfriend. We were supposed to get dinner, and 2 hours before, and I don't really do birthday. My birthday's coming up. I don't even remember when my birthday's coming up. And she canceled 2 hours before, said she didn't feel good. And I could sense there's something told me that wasn't it. And we had a few more texts. We haven't spoken since, almost a year. Too bad. It is too bad. She's a good person. So yeah, I saw Tommy Stinson that night. When I got blown off, I went to a bar, had a burger and a beer, and then I was like, oh my God, Tommy Stinson's playing near me. So thank you, Tommy Stinson, for performing on my 50th birthday and saving what would have otherwise been a kind of a bummer night. But seeing Tommy Stinson was such a treat. Number 8, the great Public Enemy. Just got this recently. It's 50th anniversary, or Hip Hop at 50. I guess it's the 50th anniversary of hip hop. I mean, I put some notes down. Public Enemy from 1987 to 1991. Just Yo Bum Rush the Show, Takes a Nation of Millions, Fear of a Black Planet, and then the Apocalypse 91 record. This is 88, I think, so I was 14 or 15. Introduced me to hip hop. I listened to hip hop for the next 5 to 7 years, almost exclusively. Like, not exclusively, but I was listening to early hip hop all the time with my friend Dan. And this record, I've seen Public Enemy a few times. I didn't mention it in the Replacements piece, but they were also at Riot Fest. I didn't want to have you think that I might be mentioning. I didn't want to give it away. And then I also saw them in Austin at South by Southwest. They played that main stage in the park. Just incredible. And this band, I mean, I wore, I hear these stories. I was really into Public Enemy when I was a teenager, and I still love them. This record holds up so well. So coming in at number 8, one of the more influential bands of all time, Public Enemy. Number 7, don't say anything, Wilco. Wilco and Uncle Tupelo and Springsteen, that's my top 3. Dylan, close. But I think they're deserving. How many bands have sustained, I mean, I would say their greatest period is 1996 to 2004, the Jay Bennett years. I guess Jay Bennett wasn't on A Ghost is Born, but being there, Summer Teeth, and Yankee Hotel Foxtrot is one of the greatest runs in the history of music. Being there, just I remember when it came out, totally new sound. They were no longer an Americana alt-country band. They were quoting Peter Laffner. Is that his name? I think that's his name. From Perubu. And then Summer Teeth was like a Beach Boys record. And then who knows what Yankee Hotel Foxtrot was. Nobody had ever done anything like it before. They still make records. Some are really good. I think Cruel Country from 2022 or 1 is a really strong record. One of, maybe in their top 5. But just, I mean, the version with, my favorite version was Jeff Tweedy, Jay Bennett, John Sturrett, Ken Coomer, and Bob Egan. That version of the band, there's a couple videos on YouTube of them performing. I think it's in Nova Scotia, like in the snow. Is that Nova Scotia? It's snowy, I think it is. And just how raucous they were, and probably the most important band in my life. And I think they are undoubtedly one of the greatest American bands. At number 6, The Grateful Dead. Another band that I was huge into in high school and college, sort of faded from my view when I got into alt country and indie rock, and have gotten really back into in the past 5 to 10 years. Saw them twice. I think they were both in 1994, Giant Stadium, one summer. And, you know, they age really well. Obviously, Phil Lesh just recently passed away, which is really sad. I was working at Bar None Records, which I've mentioned here, when on the day Jerry Garcia died. I remember I was going to Tramps, which was a venue in Midtown Manhattan, to drop off some CDs. I think it was maybe Edwin Collins, who was on Bar None at the time. And then I got back to the Bar None office. You know, we didn't have cell phones then. Got back to the Bar None office, and I walked in, and everybody just seemed a little bit shook, and they shared that Jerry Garcia had passed away, which I couldn't believe, because I'd just seen him within the past year live. So, grateful that are up there. That was number 6. I may have said 5, I meant 6. Number 5, Big Star. Truly three records. This one, number 1 record, then Radio City, and then third, or Sisters Lovers. It's got 2 titles. The last one is my favorite. They're all incredible. And this one holds, Lane and I were once driving from New Jersey, I think to Cincinnati. It may have been when we drove to St. Louis to research Uncle Tupelo. But we stopped at a record store somewhere in Central Jersey. It wasn't Princeton Record Exchange or those famous ones in the Princeton, Lawrenceville area. It was some random record store. We walked in, and I had never heard of this band. And this was showing in one of the bins, and Lane just pointed at it and said, "Buy that." And I still have that copy. I don't know if it's an original, but it's an early, might be from 1978. But these 4, the original band, Chris Bell, Andy Hummel, Alex Chilton, and Jody Stevens. Jody Stevens is the only one who's still alive. He is one of the sweetest men in the world. I've just said hello to him a few times. I know a lot of people who know him and have met him and just said he's just a beautiful human being. He reminds me of like a male version of Mavis Staples, like that one incredible artist that is also has like this soulful, godlike feel to them. I don't know. So I've heard people say about Mavis. I've never met her, but I've just heard that she has that feeling, like when you're in the room with her, that you're the most important person in the world. And I mean, indie rock, talk about influential. Yeah, they didn't sell records. They're much more popular now than they've ever been, or in the last 10 years than they've ever been. The story's sad. Chris Bell died young. But Big Star, I mean, Matthew Sweet, Wilco, R.E.M. owes a lot to Big Star, Teenage Fan Club, just so many great bands and singer-songwriters. Sometimes I argue that I think Big Star is the greatest American band, and honestly, anybody in this top 10 or even 15 could be, and even some that didn't make it. At number 4, I have Creedence. Creedence's run, which I wrote down here, from 1968 to 1970. So 3 years. 3 full years, fullish. I don't know what month they formed and what month they disbanded, but they put out self-titled Bayou Country, Green River, Willie and the Poor Boys, and Cosmos Factory from 1968 to 1970. That's incredible. They were obviously not around long, I think 5 years, but their output in that period is one of the greatest runs in the history of music. John Fogerty's still playing. I never saw Creedence. I wasn't even born when they broke up, I don't think. I don't remember the exact year they broke up. Was it 73, 72? But I have seen John Fogerty. I saw him at the Garden State Arts Center. This must have been the late 90s. Whiskey Town opened. I think they got thrown off the tour after that. Ryan Adams had one of his scenes. But John Fogerty was great. Loved it. 3 left. Wonder if you're guessing. Number 3, the Byrds. I listened to them all morning this morning just to like get a feel for where they should be. and I really considered putting them at 1. But just unreal band. So many great songs, so many like variations on their sound. I mean, I think of them as the Wilco of this period. Wilco's more experimental, but you know, when the Byrds did like Sweetheart of the Rodeo, just Americana at its best. I just absolutely love this band, and I don't think they get talked about enough. That's all I have on the Byrds for now. This is a long video. Number 2, the Velvet Underground. This is White Light, White Heat. You know, Velvet Underground, I think 1967 to 1970 is where all their great records came out. So right in that sweet spot with Creedence and so many other great bands. Imagine being in that time as a huge music fan and that music was coming out. I mean, they're rock and roll, they're indie rock, singer-songwriter, they're everything. I still listen to them, and I cannot believe that this music was made in the 60s. Sounds like it was made in the mid-2000s or mid-2015s. You know, bands like The Strokes, Interpol, I'm sure maybe the White Stripes to some extent. Like, there's so many bands. And probably every band that I love post-1980 was influenced by the Velvet Underground. You all know them, and doesn't get much better. But I guess it gets better by 1. And maybe this won't come as a surprise, maybe it will. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was sort of the most obvious choice. I didn't hesitate, and that's R.E.M. I think they're the greatest American band ever. Basically 1983 to 1992, just almost, you know, basically a 10-year run. I mean, Life's Rich Pageant, Document, Murmur, which is this one, Automatic for the People. I think Out of Time gets sort of a bad rap. I don't know why. I love that record. I saw R.E.M. once, 1994, on the Monster Tour at Great Woods up in Massachusetts. Betty Servier opened. They were tremendous. This is a band, if they were to get back together, I would pay as long as I still have a job and have, you know, a good income. I would pay whatever it takes. Michael Stipe is not just the whole band. All the stuff Mike Mills has done after R.E.M. with Peter Buck, with the -5. They did the record with Wilco, which is such an underrated record. If you haven't heard that, listen to the -5 Down with Wilco. Incredible record. Bill Berry obviously left the band early. It sounds like they're never going to perform again, although I know Michael Stipe recently did some R.E.M. songs for the Kamala Harris campaign. I think he did some songs with Jason Isbell. But this is it. They created indie rock. I mean, some would say no, but songwriting, musicianship, originality, fun, creativity. I mean, this is it. The R.E.M., they're the best ever. One of the best ever globally. But they certainly have some more competition outside the U.S. So that is my top 15. Thank you for John at the Digital Gramophone for inspiring me to do this. It was fun. A lot of bands left off here that I wrote down. Bands like Sly and the Family Stone, the Ramones, Blondie, Pixies, Talking Heads. So many that Steely Dan, they were right on the edge. But I couldn't put everyone in, and a lot of those bands that I just mentioned are not as dear to me as the 15 that I mentioned, or that I ranked. So despite being incredible artists, it's funny that there's like a Sly and the Family Stone, is it a greatest hits that's really popular, that I ordered, and it's on the way, because, yeah, John at the Digital Gramophone talked about it. So I ordered the record, because I know Sly and the Family Stone, just don't know them nearly as well as I should. Gotta by Voices, who I just mentioned, would be in there. This was a lot of fun. Thank you again to John. Do yours if you feel like doing your top 15 or top 5 or top 5,000. Hope you all have a good weekend, and I hope you're all doing well in the next couple days. Got a big few days here in America. But I will talk to you soon. Take care.